Hello, everyone. This is Dory Clark, and I'm so pleased to be here with my friend Stever Robbins. Stever and I are here talking today about strategic thinking, interpersonal communication, and more. We want to help you be able to get it done and to lead a better life. And we are so happy to be diving in here on LinkedIn Live as part of their creator program. Stever, so good to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Actually, I guess LinkedIn invited both of us, but
That's right. Props
yeah,
to LinkedIn.
pleasure to be here.
That's great. So if you're tuning in, please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know who you are and where you're dialing in from. And we want to make sure to get your questions for Stever or me, for that matter, as well. So Stever, the first question that I have, one of the things that you are best known for is you did a TEDx talk back now in 2012 that was quite popular, and it was about living an extraordinary life. And you shared some principles that I think are quite valuable. Can you tell us a little bit about what you talked about and how that all worked?
Sure. The presentation came from it came when I hit a particular age that ends with a zero. I started to wonder. I realized, wait a minute, the things that I thought would get me someplace in life, have they? And the things that the people who I went to school with, because I went to a couple of really big name schools, so I figured if the people that I went to school with, if anyone should have an amazing, extraordinary life, it should be them. So I literally just started calling people up and I said, where are you in life? What led you here? And did the things you thought would lead you here, are those the things that did? And I found that there were four major pieces of conventional wisdom, which the people who had extraordinary lives had violated. So these are four things we take for granted, but in fact they didn't seem to work particularly well. And one was what I call the myth of hard work, which is work hard and you'll get ahead. Another one is the myth of goals, which is that you should set specific goals for yourself and your life, for like 10 years out, and then just ignore everything that doesn't lead to those goals. And actually, you and I could have a really interesting discussion about that because, of course, The Long Game, your recent book, uh, is about long-term life planning. Yes. The third one is the myth of plans, right? Plans are great for a really specific task that you know how to do. But when you're talking about planning your life, it turns out that plans are not necessarily as useful. And then the last one I call the marshmallow effect, which you may have even heard of. This is about deferred gratification, and that you should, if you defer gratification and work hard now, and again, there's that work hard thing, you'll get what you want, or you'll end up someplace amazing. And there's a lot of caveats with that. So what I did is I designed, with the help of my coach at the time, I designed a 3-year experiment where I very explicitly lived the opposite of those beliefs. I didn't plan. I didn't set that type of goals. I made my decisions about what to do in part based on what came easy and passionately instead of hard work. And I didn't go for deferred gratification. I didn't mind it, but that wasn't like a driving force. And in those 3 years, I had the most amazing and incredible life that I could ever have dreamt of. So that's what the TEDx talk was about.
That's amazing. So I have to ask, was it a 3-year experiment that then stopped, and now you're back to being very goal oriented and marshmallowing all the way, or did you stop? And if so, why did you stop? If it was so great.
That's actually a really interesting question. I have a brain that's very literal, and I have actually some vaguely hilarious stories about that. I once gave myself amnesia for 10 years of projects I had done because I enjoyed them so much. This was musical theater, that I said to myself after being in a musical, I said, you know what? This is so much fun that it would almost be better if I didn't remember how much fun it is, because otherwise I would run off to New York and audition for shows. And literally, I thought that, and I woke up the next day and forgot I had done musical theater. I forgot 10 years worth of shows I had been in. It was the bizarrest thing. And it wasn't for 10 additional years that something happened that triggered the return of the memories.
Well, it's so good the apple hit you on the head. Geez.
Yes. Same thing with the 3-year experiment. I actually declared that it would be a 3-year experiment. I chose that time frame for very deliberate reasons. And on the day after the 3-year experiment ended, I woke up and my brain just popped back to the previous method of being. And then I forgot that I had actually been living. Like it's the weirdest thing. I have a strange brain, but what happened is that I was asked to reprise the Living an Extraordinary Life presentation just a couple of weeks ago, and I did it. And I was like, wait a minute, this is really good advice. Hey, those 3 years were pretty amazing. So as we speak, I am actively trying to get myself back into that mindset.
That's fantastic. Wow, Stever. And we're getting a special cameo from Heath the kitten. So hi, Heath. We're very glad to have you here living your extraordinary life as well. And we want to make sure that we are saying hi to some of the great friends who are joining us. We have wonderful people tuning in. Badresh is here from Mumbai, Angelina from Hyderabad, Jennifer's here from Chattanooga, Alana from Conway, South Carolina, Vaishali from Delhi. Wow, India in the house. Go subcontinent. We have Izyagbor from Nigeria, Terry's here from Orlando, Smita from Atlanta, Brian from Cleveland, Tolga from Poland, Bavesh also from India, Jolene from Southern California. Yeah, so sorry about the little Nas X situation. Be good, Jolene. We've got Katarina from Portugal, Solomon from Maryland. This is amazing. So glad to have all of you here. Steve Robbins and I are talking about strategic thinking, interpersonal communication, and how to lead an extraordinary life with features by Heath the kitten. So, Steve, one thing that I am curious about now, you were talking about framing up a long-term life for yourself that people feel good about. One thing we were talking about just before we went on was the idea about, okay, let's say you create a long-term plan, maybe like let's call it a 10-year plan. This is something I talk about in my new book, The Long Game. What if you get it wrong? This is the thing that people really worry about a lot. Like, what if I make a plan and it's the wrong plan? How would you think about that? And how do you hopefully prevent that from happening?
So this story relates directly to your book, because when I read the book, something that really stood out for me is you don't think in terms of I'll call them bounded steps. The kinds of things that you do in your life and that you've done to build your career are things that apply across different contexts, right? In fact, you have the Recognized Expert program, which by definition applies in different, it's not the recognized, culinary expert, it's the recognized expert in general. And the strategies that you cover in your book, I would call them meta strategies, because what they do is they build skills, they build connections, they build experiments that are specifically designed to be divergent. So the strategies and the things that you cover are things that will start to create generalized luck for someone. In fact, this is one of the things that I talk about in the Living an Extraordinary Life presentation. I actually believe that luck is responsible for far more of our outcomes than we think. We really don't like the story that it was. Can I tell the story about the Get It Done guy?
Oh, please do. Yes.
So, so back when I believed that everything was under my control, I started this little podcast in 2007 called the Get It Done Guy. And I had this aspiration. I wanted it to get in the top 100 business podcasts on iTunes. So I hired a PR company. We were putting together this whole PR plan, and we were going to launch on January 1st, 2008. And the Get It Done Guy hit #1 in the business category on iTunes on December 27th, 2007, 3 days before the PR campaign was set to go off. And honestly, that was world shattering for me. Not because I had the #1 podcast, and it stayed #1 for several years, by the way. Not because I had the #1 podcast. It was world shattering because it was like this wrench that said, hey, this succeeded before you did the PR campaign. So if it had succeeded 2 weeks later, I would have ended up believing that the PR campaign caused the success. As it was, what it said to me is there's a lot more to luck, or there's a lot more to outcomes in the realm of luck than I had given it credit for. So then I started asking the Dory Clark meta question, which is, okay, if luck is the key, what are the things that make someone lucky? And, I can tell you something that doesn't make people lucky. If you sit in your house all day and all night and play video games and never talk to another person, luck is very unlikely
During
to find.
COVID?
Well, there is that. But luck is an aspect of who you meet, where you go, and it's basically exposing yourself to a lot of turbulence and relationships that can help you if some piece of that turbulence looks attractive. and you discuss this in your book, a lot of luck and the kinds of strategies that I think will get you to a 10-year, will get you someplace interesting in 10 years and someplace cool, maybe not where you expect it to go, are the kinds of things like creating a really strong, diverse network of people who have lots of different interests, who can expose you to things you've never been exposed to before. Developing, and again, I'll call them generalized skills, like being able to know how to pitch yourself to publications, how to make yourself high profile in a particular situation. I'll even say, learn how to speak on camera, learn how to speak on audio, even if you don't like it. If you have those skills and something happens to call for those skills that will enable a single opportunity to open doors for you, you want to be able to step right up and do that.
I think that's great. So we are here with Stever Robbins. He is my special guest. If you want to learn more about Stever and his work, you can go to steverrobbins.com and check him out, sign up for his email list. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of these conversations, go to doryclark.com and you will be able to join my email list, download free self-assessments, and get notified about conversations like these. So we're here talking about interpersonal communication, about living an extraordinary life. And we want to say hi to some of the great folks who are tuning in. Solomon's here from Maryland. Matula is from Athens, Greece. We have Chris from Indore, India. We have Cami from Puerto Vallarta. Very nice. Gabriella's from the Czech Republic. Nargis is from Iran. We have Alphonse from Indonesia. Falaka from Lagos. We have Marina from Tampa. This is great. We have a person who just bought my book. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. The Long Game. Nancy says, hola from Mexico. Maria from Brazil. Oh my goodness. We're so glad to have you here. Lorena from Honduras. This is an international crowd and we're so happy to have you. Now, Stever, you were just talking about the role of luck. And I am curious, maybe you can talk in your own life. You have had a very eclectic career. Can you talk about some of the strategies that you employ on a regular basis to put yourself more in the path of luck? What do you do to actually get out and meet people, especially perhaps during COVID when things are a little bit weirder?
Yes. Well, during COVID, it's been harder. What I often do is once upon a time, I used to go to business networking events, and I found that I just couldn't, they drive me crazy because, believe it or not, I'm actually very shy around new people and around people who I don't know that we have a point of connection. And the most amazing way of meeting people I've ever found is this conference that you go to too, called Renaissance Weekend, where you basically connect with people based on ideas. So if there's something you're interested in, you go to sessions where where people are talking about that, and then you meet the people in the audience, you meet the panelists, and you start to form connections around ideas. Once I realized that that's the thing that works for me personally to be able to connect with people, I now do things like so I'll read an interesting book like The Long Game, and I will make a list of concepts from that I think are things that other people may not have thought of. And then I'll just start bringing those up in conversation with people. And I'll do it online. I'll do it in LinkedIn. I'll comment on people's threads. And I will then send them a message and say, we had this thread, this concept came up. I'd love to hear your perspective on it because I know how I would apply it in my life, but I don't know how you would apply it in yours. And so literally I go after the interesting people. And I try to connect on the basis of shared interests because I don't know how to connect any other way. It's frankly.
I think that sounds like an amazing plan. And I'm just putting this up on the screen because why not? Look at that. Stever looks like Keanu Reeves' cousin. Well, thank you, Paul. Very nice.
Awesome.
Yes, we're tapping into the matrix right here, right now on LinkedIn Live. So please feel free to type your questions into the chat box. We're talking with Stever Robbins. You can learn more about him and his work at steverrobbins.com. And we're talking about all kinds of things. We're talking about strategic thinking. We're talking about goal setting and living an extraordinary life, how to communicate effectively. So whatever's on your mind, type it in and we would love to hear from you. And so, yes,
I'm gonna interrupt here for a second. I just also had a quick thought.
Please.
Here, which is another skill for meeting people. And this is going to be weird. Comedy improv. Take comedy improv classes, and one of the things that you learn is to just take any two things and put them together, right? Because you have an audience and you say, okay, audience, give me an object, and they say pineapple, and then you say, give me a location, and they say construction site, And on the spot, you have to put those two together and tell a story or act out a story that has something to do with the pineapple that fell into the bulldozer and caused the whole thing to clog. But then when the bulldozer clogged, you saw that there was a kitten underneath and you rescued the kitten. And it was a grand story of triumph and heroism. Once you have that skill, you can do that anywhere. So you can go to a conference, and if there's someone you want to meet and you hear them making a couple of you hear them commenting about some concept that they learned or that's important to them, you can just kind of take that concept, put it together with something in your brain, and boom, instant conversation. Most useful business skill of any business skill that I learned was comedy improv. And I didn't learn it for business. I learned it for fun, and then was like, oh, this is very useful.
Absolutely. I love that. And I'm a big believer as well. I did improv when I was in college, and I actually talk in the long game about some of my adventures with stand-up comedy, a related art form. So I think that's really interesting, Stever. Thank you. Another concept that I wanted to talk with you about. So you were alluding to this earlier. One of the many hats that you've worn over the years is, for a long time, you were running the Get It Done Guy podcast, which is about productivity. You wrote a book, in fact, with Get It Done Guys, quick and dirty tips about productivity. And so I am curious. During COVID, I think most of us probably felt like our productivity was declining, sometimes in small ways, sometimes precipitously. How do you think about the concept of productivity during a pandemic, during hybrid work? What are the things that we all need to keep in mind?
So the one word answer is boundaries, but there's actually a more subtle answer to that. Your brain sorts out activity by location. Once upon a time, there were dedicated locations for every type of activity. So if you were cooking, you went into the kitchen. If you were writing a book, you sat at your writing desk. If you were going to be listening to music, you went into the living room where the record player was. And what happens is that your brain gets habituated to associating different places with different activities. So the good news is, if you want to write, when you sit down at your writing desk, your brain actually shifts more into writing mode. And then when you get up from your writing desk, your brain shifts out of writing mode. Well, during COVID, we have smashed, well, it started before COVID, but COVID really accelerated it. We have smashed everything we do into these screens that we sit in front of all day. Same stimulation, same peripheral vision, same everything else. So one of the things that I find really important for me is to put contextual markers on different areas of your life, right? So you have a dedicated place where you do work. Get a screen if people interrupt you that you can put up where they know don't disturb, don't disturb mommy or daddy or brother or sister or roommate while
Or
the
cat
screen.
mom or cat dad.
Exactly. Something else that I've done is, because a lot of what I do is done by video and I'm on Zoom usually for 4 hours a day. I use my Zoom background to put me into different mindsets. So I have I have a background when I'm writing. I'm working on a book right now, and it's a picture of a writing desk with a cup of coffee. And whenever I look at myself, if I'm on a Zoom call, I know I'm in writing mode. The background I'm using right now, this is my boy, I wish I lived someplace that had this many windows background. But it's kind of it's a combination between it's kind of my video arena. It's like light and airy and friendly, but still it looks professional. It doesn't look like I'm sitting in the middle of a bedroom with piles of clothes everywhere. So that's one of the things that I do a lot. I also clothing, very important. I don't necessarily think you have to dress up in a suit to get into work mode, but I have certain clothes that to me signal work mode, and I change at the end of the day so that my body goes, okay, you're taking off that shirt and you're putting on, your I'm now at home clothes, right? And
Sort of a Mr. Rogers phenomenon.
exactly. That's one of my backgrounds. I actually have a background of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood that I use. So yes.
Amazing. I love that. So, Steve, a question came in from one of our viewers who's on LinkedIn, and they want to press a little bit more into the concept of luck that we
Yep.
were talking about. And they said, if luck is actually so important, doesn't that dilute the value of strategy? Why do we need a strategy if luck is the thing that's driving everything? How do you make sense of that?
Strategy gives you a direction. as do goals. And it is the place. So strategy tells you what's lucky and what isn't. If you're walking down the street and you find a dollar bill, is that lucky? Well, it is if what you're currently thinking about is going after money. If you're Elon Musk and you're busy designing a rocket ship in your head, that may actually be a distraction. So there is a degree to which luck interacts with strategy, that strategy helps you decide which elements of luck to pursue and which ones to ignore. If you and in fact, this is, I have been in periods of time in my life where I was subject to this. If you don't have a strategy in place and you don't have a big picture vision for what you're doing, then it's very easy to just pursue everything at once. And as a result, you end up making progress on nothing because you do too many things and you just spread yourself too thin, and you never build the momentum that you need for long-term success or long-term progression in something.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I definitely agree. And in the long game, one of the points that I talk about is the importance of just essentially being directionally correct. Just having strategy does not necessarily guard against the vagaries of chance and fortune intervening. There may be detours. There probably will be detours, but if you are at least knowing where you want to go and moving in that direction over time, you will get a lot closer to the outcome that you want. So I think that's a really important point.
I'll also take it one step further. And I actually wrote a Fast Company article about this, and don't have the URL off the top of my head. But one of the things that's been a balancing act in my life is having strategy as a blinder versus being able to take advantage of serendipity, right? Like to me, the number one fundamental tension in my life has been, when is something that crosses my path an attractive enough thing, spontaneous thing to do, that I should change direction? And when is it something that I should ignore and say, it's a shiny object, but I should maintain where I am now? And I think a lot of the answer to that comes from the quality of the journey that you're making towards the goal. Because really, right, I mean, if you think about goals, let's say you want to climb Mount Everest and you really want to summit, right? And you go and you do it, and you're talking to a friend. What do you say? You don't say, oh, you know what? I went to Mount Everest and then I stepped onto the summit. Like, okay, right? And you took a selfie, click, and you were done. What you do is you talk about going to the base camp, and you talk about getting prepared, and you talk about the wacky people that you met on the way. What you talk about is the journey, not the destination. And I think when something crosses your path, and this is just my latest theory, so don't take this as definitive, but when something crosses your path and you're trying to make the decision, do I stay in the direction I was going before, or do I decide it's time to pivot and really alter what's happening? I think the thing to look at is, what is the quality of the journey in both of those directions? And if in the original case, you like the people you're going to be hanging out with and the things that you're learning and the things that you're doing, great, keep going in that direction. If the other thing seems to have a more attractive end goal, but the journey doesn't sound like as much fun, I would say optimize for the journey, not the end result. Yeah, I had a coaching client once who was trying to decide between two jobs, and one job paid a lot more, but the other job was in a country where this person had a great community and they had phenomenal healthcare and everyone was happy all the time. Like, she was describing this to me and I was like, can I get a visa? Like, can I move to this country? The only element on which the high paying job was superior was the high pay. And I don't make people's decisions for them, but one of the things we talked about is, what would the experience be like of being in the high paying job versus the experience of being in the lower paying job, where that had all of the qualities that made life intrinsically wonderful in those moments.
I guess on the plus side, you'd have enough money to buy friends, but that usually works out less well.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great example, Stever. Thank you. I love that. And a question came in from another LinkedIn viewer. Thank you for your questions. Who wants to get your take, Steve, on organizational politics? They say, how do you deal with just all the drama of organizational politics if that's not who you are? You're not really good at it. If we're thinking about how to be strategic, how to communicate effectively when you're in a very political culture, what would be your advice for someone who just feels a little bit uncomfortable with that?
So first of all, I was so uncomfortable with it that that's one of the reasons that I have been a solo practitioner. I just spent a year inside of an organization and discovered that at some point, after coaching people for 20 years, I have a completely different way of understanding politics now. And weirdly, I actually think it's fun. And if you had ever told me that I would find politics fun, I would have said you were insane. Um, but the way that I dealt with politics over the last year is I actually, in my little notes pad on my iPhone, I made a note for each one of the coworkers and each one of our business partners that I dealt with. And I started keeping track of what motivates this person, what seems to be important to them. Are they more a strategic thinker or a tactical thinker? And I began approaching it like as a fun puzzle. Like,
Oh my
okay,
God, you
so
were Harriet the Spy.
yes. Okay. No, note, Dory is well read. Um, likes book metaphors. But I would notice things like that. And so in terms of advancing my agenda, I would know, okay, with this person, I want to use a book metaphor. With this other person, they're into sports. And so I need to go out and learn how sports ball works and be able to give them the sports analogy. With this other person, they're a great strategic thinker, but they can't connect strategy to tactics to save their life. And then we have this other person who's exactly the opposite. They're a great tactical thinker, but they can't even have a conversation about strategy. And I would start doing things like, if I were trying to get an idea advanced by people, I would talk to them individually and I would customize each conversation for that person. Now, again, I don't know why I found myself doing this. It just, after being a coach for 20 years, I had that much insight into human nature. But the reality is politics is part of your job if you're in a large organization. And some large organizations don't have politics, but a lot do. And if you're in a political organization and you don't like it, if you've got a friend in the organization who's good at it and can be your political foil or your political, what's it called, gatekeeper, maybe have somebody else be on the lookout for politics that's going to affect you if they can. But ultimately, it's your responsibility. And if you ignore it, you will still be affected by it. You'll just be affected by it in ways that you're not having any input to. So,
amen to that.
I know it's not the answer you want, but that's kind of the answer the only answer I have.
Yes. Well, thank you for that, Steve. That's great. We are beginning to wind down. If you're enjoying this conversation, please hit the like button and the share button so that your friends can benefit from it as well. And we will amplify. You can check out Steve Robbins at his website, steverobbins.com. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of these conversations, go to my website, doryclark.com, and you can sign up to get a free self-assessment and join the email list so you'll learn about more. Steve, the last question that I have for you is actually about yet another chapter in your storied past. I know that you were involved working at a high level in the past at Babson College. And is it university? Is it Babson University?
I think it's a college still.
Yeah, Babson College, which is known as a locus of entrepreneurship. And you
Number one school in the world.
It is amazing. I've taught at Babson, so I'm right there with you. And you worked on a concept that I thought was quite interesting that we were talking about beforehand. About it's known as effectuation. What does this mean, and why should we care about it? Why is it relevant to us?
Sure. So effectuation, it was developed by a woman named Sarah Sarasvathy, a professor at the Darden School, I believe, and it came about from examining successful serial entrepreneurs. So people who had started many successful companies and had at least one success and one failure. So these weren't just one-shot wonders or lucky. She did a really good job of choosing her set of serial entrepreneurs. And they did hundreds of hours of interviews with them and looked for patterns in how they think. And it turned out that no matter how they started off at the beginning of their career, they all converged on the same way of thinking. And that, she calls it effectuation. Not the best title. And basically, effectuation has either 4 or 5 components. I forget how many. But one is the lean startup idea. which is you want to view what you're doing as a series of experiments. And the goal of the experiments is to learn. So you're going to fail forward fast and keep learning from what's going on until you find the path that's going to work for you. Another one of the principles is, she calls it the crazy quilt, which is that success is generally composed of a not predictable in advance consortium of people, customers, suppliers, partners, colleagues, who all bring something to the table to make the successful enterprise happen. And you don't know in advance who they are. And what you want to do is be on the lookout for people who are willing to commit something. And that part is very important. You're not just looking for external feedback. You're looking for people who believe enough in your idea to commit to it in some way, either financially or with time or effort. And then you listen to their input. And if they say, I won't buy your pen, if you're a pen manufacturer, I won't buy your red pen, but if you make a blue version, I'll buy 100 of them. For that person, you would say, okay, you know what? Maybe we should try doing a blue version. That's crazy quilt. My favorite concept from effectuation is one that she calls affordable loss. Rather than coming up with an idea and calculating how much that idea will cost to put into action and then raising that chunk of money and then going and trying to do that idea, you do it in reverse. You ask, how much time, money, and reputation am I willing to spend? And you limit that to the amount that you're willing to lose. That's why it's called affordable loss. So basically, you don't ever spend more time, money, or reputation than you're willing to lose. So you never have the stress of, oh my gosh, I'm on the hook for all this stuff. You're never risking more than you're willing to lose. So you stay very calm and very centered. But then the challenge is, if I'm only willing to put in $1,000 to this idea, now I have to get creative and say, how can I accomplish this goal or at least the next step of this goal with $1,000? Because I'm not willing to put in any more of this. And I actually, two friends of mine and I, we actually ran a company for a couple of years using this system very explicitly. We wanted to test it out. And so every week we would say, how much time, effort, and money are the three of us willing to put into the company? And then what we did had to fit within that. And we got creative and we built I won't go into the details. Suffice to say, it was one of the most relaxing and pleasant entrepreneurial experiences I've had. And we shut it down after 18 months for reasons that were very, very good. And those reasons would still have applied if we had raised thousands and thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. The difference being, instead of being beholden to people to pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars, we were able to shut it down and say, we understand the problem, we understand the obstacles, and we're not willing to put in place the things we would need to put in place to get over them. So let's go on to our next thing.
Brilliant. Steve or Robbins, so glad to have you here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for tuning in.